Sasa tuko fit hivyo.
Select slide. Tuone hapa. Yeah, select hiyo. Yes, window. Ndio ile
Everyone, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to you. Are we all in? Okay. So today we're going to have a class on general parasitology and an overview of parasitic infections. And as our objectives for today, we're going to see the common classification of parasites and definition of terms used in parasitology. Now, let's begin with defining a parasite. A parasite is a living organism which lives in or upon another host and derives nutrients directly from it without giving any benefit to the host. In medical parasitology, we shall be dealing with the study of parasites which infect and produce diseases in human beings. Yes, is there a question? Is there a question? Are we all together? So let's move on. Let's move on to the general classification of parasites. And there are several methods that parasites can be defined with. So we begin with ecto and endoparasites. And when we talk about ecto and endoparasites, when we say ectoparasites are parasites that live within that inhibit the surface of the body of a host without penetrating into tissues. We mean the fleas, the ticks, the sandflies. And they serve as, and more than being ectoparasites, someone is making noise. Can we be together? Can we be in one class? Mzungu?
Yes.
Okay, so we were talking about ectoparasites, and we have said that they inhabit the surface of a body of the host without penetrating into the tissues. Now, more than being ectoparasites, they also serve as important vectors that transmit pathogenic microbes into the body of the host. Infection produced by these parasites, we term it as an infestation, depending on the number of parasites that have invaded the surface of the body of the host. You see, when you talk about a louse infection, we don't call it a louse infection because most body louse inhabit the hair of the host, and so we talk about a louse infestation of the hair. And when we move on to endoparasites are parasites that live within the body of the host, and they invade the inner tissues of the host. For example, Leishmania donovani. We also have other parasites, maybe malaria parasites. All these live within the body of the host, and they infect the body from the inside. So invasion by endoparasites it leads to an infection, and as we all know, when you have an infection, it leads to a disease. So endoparasites are further classified into protozoa and helminths. Classification for helminths for protozoans are as follows. We have the amoeba. These are the free-living amoeba. They move by means of pseudopodia. For example, Entamoeba histolytica, Naegleria florae, the Encanthomoeba species. So we have a lot of parasites under that classifications. We move on to the flagellates. We have intestinal flagellates. For example, Giardia lamblia. We have the genital flagellates, Trichomonas vaginalis, and we have the hemoflagellates. Now, hemoflagellates, I think in this instance, we can only talk about Leishmania donovani and the Trypanosoma species. We move on to the apicomplexa. Apicomplexer are parasites such as malaria parasites and the babesia. The parasites that also cause opportunistic diseases such as Toxoplasma gondii. We have Cryptosporidium species. We have Cyclospora. We have Sarcoidosis. All these, they are normally not infection, and they're not normally causes of infections to ordinary human beings, but in case your immunity is compromised, then you will have such an infection. And maybe if you have such an infection, it also presents a larger picture of your on your immune systems, and therefore one needs to have a check. So we need to move on to the next one. um, we move on to the medically important helminths, and under helminths we have uh, four classifications. We have the cestodes, we have the trematodes or the flukes, we have the intestinal nematode, and we have the somatic nematodes. Now, cestodes are called flatworms. And an example of the cestodes that we have around, we have the tiny signata, yeah, echinococcus, we have the Hemelopsis species. So they're quite a number. We move on to the trematodes or the flukes. Now, flukes live within we have the blood flukes and the liver flukes. We have the Cystostoma species. We have Fasciola hepatica, Chronoxis species. We have Fasciolopsis and others. There are quite a number, and we'll not explore at this stage. But when we come to naming them personally, when we come to naming them individually, we shall go into the specifics of each and every one of them, and including the life cycle. Now we move on to the intestinal nematodes. These are nematodes that infect the stomach of the host, the intestines of the host, and most of these are either roundworms or flatworms. Example of the roundworms, we have the hookworms, we have Ascaris lumbricoides, we have the Strongyloides species, we have Enterobius, and we have Trichuris. Somatic nematodes, we have the filarial worms, we have Dracunculus, Trichinella, we have Wuchereria, and many more. So we move on to the life cycle of a parasite. Now, a life cycle of a parasite depends on three factors. We have the host, the mode of transmission, and then the infective form. For a host, the definition of a host is an organism which harbors a parasite for nourishment and shelter, and can be classified into two. We have the definitive host and we have the intermediate host. Now, a definitive host is a host where or an organism which harbors a parasite during the sexual stage. Now, an intermediate host harbors the parasite as it undergoes the asexual cycle. Now, when we come to the individual life of the parasites, life cycle of the parasites, that's when we're going to classify them between the definitive. We're going to see who are the definitive hosts and who are the intermediate hosts. Now, some parasites also undergo a direct or simple life cycle. That means it only needs one host to complete its development. And some parasites undergo an indirect or complex life cycle, meaning that it requires two or more hosts to complete its life cycle. And for these few remarks, we end our topic today. I see we have less time remaining. So anybody with a question is free to ask. Okay, in case there's no question, we're going to conclude our session for today. And thank you very, very much for listening. Thank you.